Your spinal cord, it processes the sensory and the motor function. Okay, now let's go to the autonomic nervous system. This system is not under your voluntary control. It can be divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic we call the fight or flight. So that's when your life is in danger, this system becomes activated. And we found sympathetic nervous system will control your whole body. Like when this system is activated, when you see a bear coming towards you, so it will make your pupil dilate because you want to see more light. It will make your mouth dry because that's for the long-term survival. It will increase your heart rate, increase your breathing rate, because you want to bring more oxygen to your body. And it will inhibit all the digestive and reproductive function because this is for long-term survival. And that's the sympathetic nervous system function. Its function is make your body ready so you can survive. And all this scenario can activate the sympathetic nervous system, and you cannot help it. If you like to drive and eat at the same time, you found your body's digestive function being compromised because that's when the sympathetic system being activated. This is the interesting part, the lie detector. The lie detector, they only detect your sympathetic function. They won't be able to detect you lying or telling the truth. They will measure your heart rate, measure your blood pressure, put electrode on your skin, record your skin conductivity because when you're nervous, you sweat. And you always need someone to analyze the data. They will ask you, okay, what's your name, what's your age, and have you been to the Mountain Everest? So they will ask you a lot of questions, and they know how your body responds when you're telling the truth and when you're lying. Then they will ask you some serious questions, like where were you last night when this murder happened? Did you know this person? And they're based on your physiological response, because when we are telling the truth, we feel more calm, and when we are lying, we feel more nervous. Your sympathetic system is activated. So they use this to identify you're telling the truth or lying. And actually some women can do this, right? They will look at the boyfriend's eyes, say, where were you last night? And they can tell you're telling the truth or lying, detect the sympathetic response. And the parasympathetic nervous system is called the rest and digest. That's the systems when your body rests, and that's for long-term survival. So you found parasympathetic system still innervate the same organ of your body, but it will constrict the pupil because you don't need to see that much light. It will increase your saliva production because that's for digestive function. It will decrease the heart rate, decrease the breathing rate. It will inhibit all the digestive function and, enhance the digestive function because that's for the long-term survival. And that's the parasympathetic. So you found in the 21st century, your life is pretty stressed out and you need a vacation, you do yoga. All of this is try to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and that's for long-term survival. And eventually, these two systems need to be balanced. So you can have a healthy life. You need both. You need both. Sympathetic for short-term survival, parasympathetic for the long-term survival. One more thing, sympathetic, they usually go out from the thoracic and lumbar area of your spinal cord. Your parasympathetic come from the cranial nerve, and they call it cervical and the sacrum, the beginning and end part of the spinal cord, but they innervate pretty much the same organ in your whole body. The endocrine system, this is also a very important system. It releases the chemical molecule called the hormone, and it releases to the blood. So all the hormones need to be carried to the blood. And it will affect everything. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to talk about this system. This is as important as the nervous system. It's also for the communication. The nervous system is quick on, quick off communication. And the endocrine system is slow on, slow off. And this system also need to be balanced. Okay, so we're in the end of chapter 3. So eventually your memory, your brain functions, all based on the neuron plasticity. That's not the number of neurons, it's the connection between neuron and neurons grow. And you have some genes, it doesn't mean you're gonna have certain disease, because the gene need to be expressed and the gene need to be activated. It could be your life experience, your learnings, and your lifestyle. It can affect it. So this is actually my study. So I used the transgenic mice, and they have the fluorescent neurons. So it's easier to image their brain under the fluorescent microscope. And we found these mice, after they do the, I call it acrobatic test, they will walk on the double rope, very cute. They learn this, and gradually when they master it, we can find some neuronal change in the brain. So this is just one example. Your life experience, your learnings can trigger some gene expression, and what happens is those connection between neuron and neuron, and they are able to make it more complicated. So your experience can definitely affect your life. And let's look at some methodology we can use to measure the brain activity. So the brain used to be a black box until in the middle 20th century, the late 20th century, we have more methodology to measure the brain activity. One is called the EEG. The EEG is like a hat, you wear it, and it has a lot of electrodes, because the neurons create current, electrical signal, excuse me. So those electrical signals can be measured, and you can use this and give this subject some task, and you measure their neuronal activity, and that's the EEG. Another one called the MRI, especially the functional MRI. MRI is a machine in the hospital. They measure the tissue with a lot of water. And when they measure the brain activity, they call it functional MRI, because they measure the amount of blood flow, the oxygenated blood flow to certain brain area. So they will ask the subject to do some task, and the brain will be more activated because the blood flow increased. So they can take the picture and identify, okay, which brain area is associated with this task. So we know the genes will affect everything. When you take biology, you found, okay, they will tell you gene affect everything. But now you know the genes can be turned on and turned off. And how to turn the gene on, turn the gene off. And that's in psychology, we talk about nature and nurture. So in psychology, we found, okay, you have the gene. It doesn't mean you're going to have a disease, because the environment play a big role. So in the first lecture, I talk about this, right? The baby is supposed to be smart, but if you have a bad environment, it can compromise their brain development. So eventually it's the gene and environment interaction. And also if you have the very good environment stimulates the baby's brain, they're gonna have more synapses. It can trigger those good genes development. So eventually that's these two, the nature and nurture interaction. And let's quickly look at the genes. So the genes, it will be called transcription through the mRNA. And from the mRNA will be translated to protein. So you learned it in intro-bio. That's the process. So eventually your protein, your whole body are made of protein. So the proteins will perform the function in the body. And we talk about this in the first lecture. In your body, you have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. So 23 from father, 23 from mother. And the last pairs, that is called the sex chromosome. So the male, we have the XY, and the female is XX. Do you remember what's the genes on the Y chromosome create the male? SRY gene. So if you have 2X, that's the female, and the default type is of the embryo development is a female. And if you have XY, that's the male. So that's the SRY genes on the Y chromosome will make the embryo develop into the male. Oh, and if you have a disease happens related to the sex chromosomes, it's called the sex-linked genes. And the disease is called the sex-linked disease, like the color blindness. We have 3 times more boys have color blind than girl, and the reason is the sex gene related. So the boy only have 1 X and the girl have 2 X, so they have a protective mechanism. They can become a carrier. They don't have the symptom. But the boys are different because they only have 1 X. So if they have the bad genes, they can express it. So the colorblind gene is on the X chromosome, and turn out we have 3 times more boys have colorblind compared with girls. And the genetic principle is the gene need to be expressed. And you have the gene, it doesn't mean that you can have the disease. So it's called epigenetics. The environment will trigger the expression of the disease. Like we have a family history of depression, have a family history of mental disease. It doesn't mean that if you are part of that family member, you can have a disease. It means you have a higher risk. And the reason is the environment. And you can take good care of yourself. You have a good life, you have a good job, and you never reach the threshold to trigger the disease. It turns out you will be fine. So the epigenetics means you have the genes, but the genes need the environment to trigger it, to express, to turn into RNA, turn into a protein. So we can definitely take care of the environment part to trigger or not trigger some gene expression. Okay, that's it.